Sergeant Marcus Torres had seen enough war to know when a battle was lost before it began. The Terran Defense Force had been retreating for 3 weeks, ever since the Korthak hegemony had landed their invasion forces on Kepler-7. The aliens were everything the intelligence reports had warned about, and worse, 9-foot-tall giants, with thick chitinous exoskeletons, 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and faces that seemed designed by nightmares. The evacuation of Firebase Delta was supposed to be routine. Load the wounded, destroy the sensitive equipment, and fall back to the secondary defense line. What nobody had planned for was the Korthak patrol that materialized out of the morning fog just as the last transport was preparing to lift off. The firefight was brief and devastating. Plasma bolts lit up the dawn like deadly fireworks, while Torres and his squad provided covering fire for the evacuation. When the transport finally lifted off, trailing smoke and carrying 23 wounded soldiers to safety, Torres found himself alone in the ruins of what had been the base's communication center. That's when he heard the sound, a low, rumbling moan that definitely wasn't human. Following standard protocol, Torres should have triggered the base's self-destruct charges and made his way to the extraction point. Instead, something made him investigate. Perhaps it was the tone of that sound, which carried less threat than pain. He found the Korthak warrior trapped beneath a collapsed support beam in what had been the base's medical bay. The alien was enormous even by the standards of its species, easily 9.5 feet tall, with scarred carapace that spoke of countless battles. One of its 4 arms was pinned, and green fluid, presumably blood, pooled around several wounds in its torso. The creature's compound eyes focused on Torres as he approached, weapon raised. For a moment that stretched into eternity, human and alien stared at each other across the rubble-strewn room. Torres knew he should fire. Every manual, every briefing, every propaganda vid had made it clear the Korthak were implacable enemies who showed no mercy and expected none in return. But the alien wasn't reaching for its weapon. It was trying to shield something with its free arms. Torres moved closer, keeping his rifle trained on the massive creature until he could see what it was protecting. His breath caught in his throat. Nestled against the alien's chest was another Korthak, barely a quarter the size of the adult. A juvenile, its carapace still soft and pale, making tiny chittering sounds of distress. The giant alien's eyes met Torres's again, and this time the human saw something he'd never expected to find in those multifaceted orbs: desperation. Not for itself, but for the small being it was protecting. "Well, hell," Torres muttered, lowering his weapon. The alien's reaction was immediate, its body tensed, ready for death. Instead, Torres set his rifle aside and moved toward the support beam. The Korthak warrior watched in obvious confusion as the human began examining the collapsed structure. "Yeah, I know," Torres said, though he knew the alien couldn't understand him. "This is pretty stupid. But I've got a kid sister back home, and—" He shrugged, activating his armor's strength enhancement systems. "Guess some things are universal." The beam was massive, designed to support the weight of military equipment and multiple floors. Even with his armor's assistance, Torres could barely shift it. The alien warrior watched for several seconds, then began adding its own strength to the effort. 3 of its arms pushed against the beam, while the 4th continued to protect the juvenile. It took nearly 10 minutes, but finally, the beam shifted enough for the alien to pull its trapped arm free. The limb was clearly damaged, hanging at an unnatural angle, but the warrior ignored its injury as it carefully lifted the small Korthak in its functioning arms. Torres stepped back, unsure what would happen next. The alien could easily kill him with its remaining strength, and by all rights should want to. Instead, the massive creature stood slowly, cradling the juvenile, and looked directly at Torres. What happened next would be debated by xenobiologists for decades. The alien's throat produced a series of sounds, clicks, hums, and harmonic tones that seemed to convey meaning despite being completely unlike human speech. When Torres didn't respond, the creature tried again, this time accompanied by gestures. "You're trying to say something," Torres realized. He pointed to himself. "Human. Marcus." Then he pointed to the alien. "You are?" The creature's response was a complex harmonic that Torres's translation software couldn't pass. But it tried again, simpler this time, and the software offered a tentative translation: "Gratitude carrier Jektal." "Jektal," Torres repeated carefully. The alien's entire body language shifted at hearing its name pronounced by a human, what Torres interpreted as surprise giving way to something like approval. Jektal then made a series of gestures toward the juvenile, the ruins around them, and finally toward Torres himself. The meaning was unclear until the alien pulled something from its equipment harness, a small crystalline device that pulsed with internal light. The creature offered the device to Torres, who hesitated before accepting it. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, his armor's translation system came alive with new data streams. Suddenly, Jektal's sounds were being rendered into broken but understandable English. "This one owes debt of offspring to human warrior Torres." Jektal's translated voice was deep and resonant. "Small one lives because human chose mercy over war duty." Torres looked at the juvenile Korthak, which was studying him with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for something so young. "What happens now?" he asked. Jektal's response took several minutes as the alien carefully selected words the translation device could handle. "This one will carry word to war speaker. Human warrior showed honor to young. Perhaps there is path between star peoples that does not end in death of all." The implications hit Torres like a physical blow. First contact between species often determined the course of relationships for generations. And he, a sergeant from Detroit, who'd enlisted to pay for college, had just potentially changed the trajectory of an interstellar war. "I don't know if anyone will listen," Torres said honestly. "My people, we're scared. Your people are larger, stronger, and we don't understand your intentions." "Fear makes warriors of necessity," Jektal acknowledged. "But this one has seen human warrior choose protection of young over duty of killing. Such choice speaks of honor depth beyond surface fear." Jektal made a series of gestures, and Torres's armor indicated an incoming data transmission. Maps, communication frequencies, and what appeared to be safe passage codes filled his display. "Path to speaking ground," Jektal explained. "If human commanders possess wisdom depth, they will send word carriers, not war carriers." The sound of approaching aircraft interrupted their conversation. Human gunships, coming to extract any survivors and finish destroying the base. Torres looked between the approaching sounds and the alien family before him. "You need to go," he said urgently. Jektal nodded, then did something completely unexpected. The massive alien knelt, bringing itself down to Torres's eye level, and spoke carefully in newly learned human words. "Thank you, friend Marcus." As Jektal disappeared into the fog, with the juvenile cradled safely in its arms, Torres realized that everything had changed. He had data that could potentially end the war, proof that the Korthak were more than the mindless aggressors portrayed in military briefings. The evacuation team found him 20 minutes later, standing alone in the ruins with a translator device that contained enough cultural and linguistic data to revolutionize humanity's understanding of their supposed enemies. When asked for his report, Sergeant Marcus Torres simply said, "We need to talk to command. All of them. And we need to do it before someone does something we can't take back." The war didn't end overnight, but it began changing the moment one human soldier chose to help rather than harm, and one alien warrior chose to trust rather than attack. Sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion between individuals could shift the fate of entire civilizations. In the end, it wasn't superior firepower or tactical brilliance that prevented the complete destruction of two species. It was a sergeant from Detroit who saw a parent protecting its child and decided that some things transcended the boundaries of war.